this again on that point. I don't know, what are we doing in chapter 1 of homework? No, it's not that bad. Not that bad. Yeah. Yeah, by the way, these the homework solutions are from the book, so whoever the author is up there, the ones who did this, I have things inserted in there, but most of this is from the publisher.
This thing we're sitting out of our campus?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this shouldn't be too bad. All right, so the first problem on chapter 1, what questions before we get into the homework? Everybody okay? Yes. No, do that. And yeah, yes. Other questions? I just have a visual. Yeah.
How much trouble do you think we get in with those little plus and minuses that you have? Like you always put you were explaining it the other day, but I'm not used to doing that. You know how when you start the actual formula and you do equals plus. Do you think that that's actually going to create an issue for us on exams? Because I'm not used to doing it, so it's not.
Well, let me say two things. And this is, and by the way, see how this opened up? Let me say two things about that, and that's actually an important real-world question. What I have here on the income statement is I have all of my expenses in as a negative. Okay? For exam purposes, I couldn't care less. If you want to put them all in as positive and subtract it out, I don't really care. Okay? My question will be calculate operating profit, calculate gross margin. So I mean that's going to be my question. So exam purposes, I really don't care. Real world purposes, let me say two things. Number one, well, I won't take time to do that, but pretend all of these numbers are positive. Okay? One argument here is administrative expenses. Okay? Pretend that's a positive number. That number would, even though it's a positive, would still be subtracted from this number to get to your operating income, right? So one argument here is, if you don't know that, you shouldn't be reading financial statements in the first place. That's one argument. The other argument is, be that as it may, if you put in negative numbers here, it's a lot less confusing. Because when you, and I've done this plenty of times looking at real-world financial statements, where they put everything in as a positive, and it's a little more complex than this. You have to really pay attention to what's being subtracted from what when you get down into these areas down in here. Okay? So, on the one hand, you should know that. On the other hand, it's a little less readable. By contrast, putting in the negatives makes it very clear what's being subtracted from what. But it also clutters up your financial statements, because you've got all these dadgum parentheses in there. Okay. Frankly, which one you choose is probably just going to be firm policy. And then when you get to the upper echelons of the firm, then you make that policy. And it would also depend on the complexity of the financial statement. If it, if it's just a few lines like this, then putting in these parentheses, in my opinion, really isn't cluttering it up that much. But when you start doing, more complex and you're kind of stretched for space, then you might not do that. So there's going to be a judgment call there as well. Questions or other questions? Other questions? Okay. All right. I guess we just have here. I mean, these first few are easy. I do want to show you one thing. All right, so the first one was homework problem 1. It might be a sign. All right, so the first homework problem is here, you're given some prices. They tell you to enter them, yes, and they ask you to calculate returns for each year, which is, and I mean, this is what you're looking at is the solution. Calculating the returns is pretty easy. We did that the other day. That's the new divided by old stuff that she was talking about. So P1 divided by P0 minus 1. Okay, by the way, that one return right there is referred to as holding period return. Remember? So you can see calculate your holding period returns. Be careful. Make sure, this is important for exam purposes and real world purposes, make sure you pay attention to which way the data are going. In this case, the newest is at the bottom. I'm used to doing it the other way, where the newest is at the top. So I'm used to doing this divided by that. Okay? So you got to be careful. All right? Fair notice on the exam, one of the answer choices is going to be if you make that mistake. Not because I'm mean and nasty, but because that would be a bad mistake to make. And I've done it more times than I care to admit. Okay. All right, so there's our, there's that, and then they're asking to calculate the average, right? So we do average. Do they calculate that?
Yeah, it's for the arithmetic. And also
Format 8, floating period return, format percentages, whatever. Calculate the total return for them. Yeah. Doing the total return. Yeah, I mean that's total return. This divided by that minus 1. I don't know that anybody really cares about that. But they ask you, so for the record, that would be your total return. They also ask you your geometric average return, which we talked about the other day. And you guys remember that, right? Okay. Well, what they have on here, I don't know if they have it. No. Okay. Recall we did this the other day. If you use your geomean function on this, it doesn't work because we have the negative numbers, so we need to get rid of those, right? So I'm doing it this way on purpose. Okay, they did it this way as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each of these numbers and add 1 back to it to get rid of the negative because we're subtracting 1 over here. So that makes it just P1 divided by P0. Okay, yeah, I'm doing this on purpose. So when you copy that down, you get down to this, and then we subtract 1. I'm doing it that way because that's the way they show you in the book. One of these formulas, that right there, that formula does it that way. Okay? Well, what I wanted to show you was a pretty cool feature of Excel in case you're not aware of this. And like I said, I really should use this more often myself because it's a good time saver. It's also a good space saver, and it's called array functions. Okay? So all of the, in fact, let me do it on averages. Let me do it on average. Okay, so if we were calculating the arithmetic average of this, and this is what I posted a video of this morning. So if you've never seen this before, you didn't quite catch it or whatever, you can hop on there. It's like 1 minute and 47 seconds long. Okay, so you can be reminded on there. So you guys all know how to calculate an average of those returns. Okay, which is where we went in here and did the P1 divided by P0 minus 1 stuff. All that. Well, with array functions, you can do all of that in one single function. Okay? And the way that you would do it is, I'm going to take the average, and I'm going to divide all of the P1s by all of the P0s. So far, so good? So subtract 1 from all of those. So far, so good. And the trick with array functions is if you hit Control Shift, hold down those keys, and then hit Enter, it'll put that one function in there, and that saves you all of these steps right here. And you can tell that it's an array function because these brackets are in the formula cell. And no, it doesn't work if you just go in there and put brackets in. At least last time I tried to do that. Yeah, when I was first learning this, I was trying that, and it didn't work. So you got, again, the trick on that is hit Control, what did I say, Control Shift. Hold down Control Shift and then hit Enter.
What happens if you don't hit Control Shift?
Doesn't work. At the risk of sounding. So if I just hit Enter, because that's not, the average function doesn't understand that. It's not a legitimate average function. So Control Shift, hold it down, and there you go. So I really should do this more often myself because it's a good time saver, good state, good memory saver. So, okay. All right, questions about that? Questions about that? Okay. GeoMean we went over yesterday, so you should be good to go on that with the homework problems. They asked you to graph this stuff. I've told you already that I'm not going to get too frisky with you on the graphs, but you should be able to do a basic scatter diagram graph. So I've already showed you that, but there was a question. Somebody asked a question just a minute ago about graphs. Formatting. Okay, this is the scatter diagram graph that they made for this homework problem. Formatting gets pretty deep, and I have to be honest with you, I've actually become better at this over the last year, like I already told you, out of necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention, so I've actually had to become better at this. You can do lots of things. The gist of it is you can kind of take two approaches. One is to click on the chart and right-click, and you have all sorts of formatting options. The other is to go into the insert section and then scatter diagrams, and you have formatting options in here that are eluding me for. Where am I wrong?
It's the last chart tool.
Top right.
Right above.
Oh, gotcha. There we go. Yeah. And you have several, you have lots of charting format issues here. You can format, one of the things that we will be doing when we get into the investing section, for example, is if you click on the data and then right click, you can add a trend line to that data and you can show your linear regression equation on the chart. Something we'll be doing in the investing section. I'm screwing up the chart here, but you guys, I think you get the idea. Like I say, I mean, lots of things. Most of which I can't test you at, therefore aren't really important for us in this course. I mean, I'll be happy to go through some things after. If you're looking for something specific, I'll be happy to talk to you after class about it. A few of the chart format things that we will do, though, are this. Sometimes you can get the data in reverse order, and if you right-click on the axis, it just gives you an option to reverse that. So there's a few of those things, none of which come into play on the first exam. All right, other questions, because I think that pretty much wraps up the first homework problem. Cutting a few corners, because we already talked about GeoMean, we already talked about basics of scatter diagrams, which will get you through the first exam. So questions about anything else? You guys had enough for 1 week? Me too. All right, let's call it at that point. What we'll do on Monday is wrap up the homework rather briefly, because there really isn't a whole lot to this.